Hello, everyone. Let's put down the cafe sounds a little bit here. I'm going to start a class today. I'm going to spare you my smiling face, although I will let you know that there is a person back here. This is Joshua, and today we're going to do a little discovery into aroma, memory, and flavor. Now, why are we doing this? Well, if you come into our cafes or you visit us at our labs, if you're one of our wholesale accounts, or if you've come through tours, or come to any of our special Sunday cuppings, that we spend a lot of time cupping coffee, tasting coffee, and talking a lot about flavors. And even if you've just taken a look at any of the bags of our coffee, you'll see that on those, we always list some tasting notes. I'm going to get it up here. It's a little blurry and pull it back a bit. Here on the Guatemala, we have brown sugar, apple, raisins. Another coffee I've been brewing a lot lately is our Burundi Gahahe, the fully washed version. And that is tangerine, apricot, and hibiscus. And here, the Papua New Guinea that we've been working with the last couple of days, another new coffee. Here we have jasmine, caramel, and cedar. Those are all, across those three coffees, a bunch of different flavor profiles. Something we've had to answer a lot of questions about is with something like this, with our new steeped coffee, which is a single sachet coffee, freshly roasted, ground, and then sealed here. For making a single cup of coffee, we see that we have the notes here, which are cherry, chocolate, and spice. And folks might often ask, if they're new to specialty coffee, is it flavored with those things? And we say, no, it's not. It's that we have, through the process of working with our farmer partners and through the coffee department, roasted it in such a way that we believe we pull up those flavors, those tasting notes, we often call them, right? And so much of that, if you've been through a cupping before, has to do with aroma. Often, when you look at all those words on any one of our coffees, you might be a little surprised because they're really varied and they're all over the place. Often folks might think of a few of those right off the bat. Maybe they think of chocolate or nuts. But in actuality, we have a very elaborate tasting wheel in coffee. Here's one of the latest versions created by the SCA. And again, it's going to be a little blurry for you to be able to see, but working around this wheel, very similar to wine wheels you might have seen, we have a whole bunch of different flavor, and in this case, we call them flavor or tasting wheel, but those also relate to aromatics. We're going to talk about why in just a second. As we look across this wheel, you'll see we have broad categories in the center. categories like roasted, spice, nutty, cocoa, sweet, floral, fruity, green, right? So those then break down as it moves out through the wheel into very specific elements around the outside rim. So for example, under spice, we have a category that moves down into brown spice. And under the brown spice, we have clove, cinnamon, nutmeg, anise. All of these broad categories, these sensory elements and flavors that can be brought forth from well-roasted coffee, then move down into very specific descriptors, which are the types of descriptors you'll see when we talk about our coffee. So this is the flavor wheel, but we're going to talk a little bit about the relationship between aroma and flavor. And the key today that I hope we go away with is that everyone has the ability to discern these qualities in the coffee, and what it takes is a little bit of practice and a little bit of understanding. So the first thing is understanding some aspects about aroma. So when it comes to a flavor or a taste, we know that approximately, I'm doing this upside down and backwards, 70% of the qualities that we taste are going to be based off of the sense of smell. And that then leaves 30% for the gustatory, or on the palate. So why is that? There's a relationship between those. So when we have a lovely cup of coffee, let's say, the aroma, the coffee, the smell of the coffee can come in, and there's obviously very small, fine particles move up through the nasal passage, and we engage with the olfactory sense in two ways as we experience any food or drink. The first is this olfactory, which is through the orthonasal olfaction, it's called, coming in through the nose. But then as we drink this coffee, some of it's going to go down into these taste receptors here. But there's also going to be components of that same quality that allowed us to smell it through the orthonasal are also going to be here, what's called the retronasal, right? Which is coming down over the top of our tongue, and we're going to be able to be picking up those qualities as we breathe them in also through our mouth. So there are two ways that we're experiencing aroma. And then gustation is, of course, the other factor, the actual parts of our palate that are being touched by the coffee. Now, why do we have such strong emotions with aromas, and what is going on? So when we have the experience of tasting and aroma, we know that now that part of when we taste it and take anything in as a drink or a food, it hits our palate, but it also comes back into that retronasal olfactory sense, as well as that primary olfactory sense. And it hits over here first, the olfactory bulb, which is at this portion of the brain. I have now, strangely enough, I don't have the brain facing the right direction, but I think you'll get what we're doing here. This is the front part of the brain where the olfactory bulb is. What the olfactory bulb does is it processes those components, those physical components that we've sensed through our olfactory senses, and it turns them into a signal that the brain can understand. That is then sent, it travels then over to this inner part in the core of our brain, the amygdala, this little spot right here, which is tied to emotions, and underneath it, the hippocampus. So it moves to the amygdala and then the hippocampus. And the hippocampus has to do with learning and memory. So that's why when we think about aroma and smell, it ties in so directly. After it's been it's been processed by the olfactory bulb, it moves into really the center of the brain, early parts of the brain as far as the brain's development, and immediately is tied to both emotions and to learning and memory. So when you smell something and you have an emotional reaction or a memory, that's part of why. It's just the way it's being processed in the brain. So that's really the goal today as we move through some of these broad categories. What I want everyone to consider is we're going to take what was on that flavor wheel, and we are going to look at things that you deal with probably every day in your kitchen. And there's an opportunity we have now as we're working with these foods to begin to appreciate them, and we can actually build our ability to trace and track them in our memory. That's it. All it takes is practice. Everybody is spending more time at home now and probably spending more time cooking. So this is a great opportunity to begin practicing and really learning to discern some of those aromas. And one of the ways we can do that is by beginning to make some direct associations with them. So where you're in the kitchen and you're dealing with ingredients, we can begin associating memories with them, right? So here we have some of the parts that we find in this section of the flavor wheel: green and vegetal. I've just chosen a few of them. We have herb-like, hay-like, pea, olive oil. And something you can do as you're cooking later today for late lunch or maybe for dinner is you can go ahead and we smell while we're cooking, but take a moment and actually really just do it, smell. And then it's going to probably cause a memory. So I'm writing down what this made me remember, and you probably can't read it, and here's the thing: the memory you have, is going to be completely personal to you. It's going to be something that you have that's your own. But that's part of what we're doing is we're beginning to make deep associations, and we're making cognitive associations with them in real time, right? And that means that we're going to kind of help cement the memories and the associations with the olfactory experience we're having. So in this case, I smelled this olive oil, and it made me think of a restaurant where I used to work called Il Fornaio, which is an Italian restaurant. And I just recall I would go in, and when I was in that restaurant, that aroma of olive oil was so strong because they were baking bread, and they would often brush the tops of the bread with olive oil, right? And that would make this amazing aroma. And then, not coincidentally enough, there was also in that same place, for me, a lot of smells of herbs. So this one, when I smell this, I think of camping with my dad. When I was quite a bit younger, we'd go out with my dad, and when we camped, we were in Washington, and this is sage here, and there was wild sage out there, and I just remember that smell of wild sage specifically in the summer in Eastern Washington. As soon as I smell that, it just takes me right back there. So that's a practice that, if you've been through one of our tours, or one of our Sunday cuppings before where we did this, we lay out a big table and we go through this and we talk about these things. And the reason I like to do it is I like us all to really know that when we write down these descriptors on the coffees, we're doing it with very specific experiences in mind. So that's some of the green vegetal qualities. The next one, which you might see us mentioning often, are spices. So similar process here. I'm smelling the nutmeg, and for me, the nutmeg, I just think of the holidays. And I think of my mom's eggnog. I think of her making eggnog, and she always, grates fresh nutmeg onto the top of that. And you can, once you're working with spices, in your kitchen, you can warm them up a little bit and just take in those smells and really think about. Now you're not writing it down probably while you're cooking, but you can at least just for a moment consider, what does cinnamon remind you of? First thing I'm going to say here is chai. I just think of a chai, right? Another large category with a lot of our coffees are fruits and berries. So orange, this is a blood orange. I often think of our dancing goats when I smell orange. I've had espresso before, right off the bar, that has that orange quality and spice as well. We just had experienced. Mangoes here, blueberries. When you have, and this is going to be self-referential, but I'm just going to say natural Ethiopia or Yemeni. My aha coffee moment came with a natural processed Yemeni coffee. This is 22 years ago. And I remember Tim, the roaster, would come in every morning and he would brew a single Melita filter of coffee, something he'd roasted the day before. And he had brought in just one bag of this Yemeni coffee. And I remember he offered me a sip of the coffee. And as I brought it up and the aroma came up, unmistakable quality of blueberries rising up off of that coffee. And I think that was the point when I realized that I probably was going to be taking coffee a little more seriously, right? So we can see over in the wheel here, we have an area of this, where under fruity, we have berry. We also have citrus and dried fruit under there. Berries are pretty prevalent in the coffees I like. Those are often natural coffees. We have one last category, and this is the one I left for last just because it seems, in a sense, kind of one of the most obvious for lots of folks. And this is because a lot of these, I think, become associated with roast profiles, right? So, and as you can see, as you watch this, everything's gotten a little bit darker as we move through these. And even on the wheel, you can see things move through color and then move into darkness as we move over into the area that are called nutty, cocoa, and sweet as well. And here we have some chocolate, some dark chocolate, some maple syrup. Oh wow! When I smell maple syrup, I think of oh my gosh, pancakes as a Cub Scout. Yeah, that's all right. I can be honest with you all. That's what first thing I think of is pancakes when I was a Cub Scout. Was that aroma, that first early morning aroma of pancakes. And again, what we're doing here as we move through is, and when you're in your kitchen, when you're interacting with foods that you're cooking, just take a moment and just really intentionally smell whatever you're working with in that moment, and just allow yourself to think that what's your first association with it? What is the thing that it makes you think of, that it brings to your mind? Right? And it seems like a little bit of a removed from coffee drinking in our standard practices, right? But it really is a way that I have learned over time to get more familiar with the aromas that we talk about when we are discussing coffee. Again, based off of a fairly elaborate coffee wheel here. So I would invite you to join us as we move through the next week. We're going to be having videos every day, twice a day, one at 9 a.m., one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And often they're broken into a brewing session in which we brew coffee with a method or feature a coffee that's new for us. Or it is a conversation like this where we just go into a broader subject. And as we do that, I'll start talking more about these things we just spoke about today, right? So I'll reference this video and we'll probably do a repeat in another week or two, just because we hope that we can, as people are spending more time at home and are making coffee more themselves, our hope is not just that you try more of our coffees, but our hope is that we can help you elevate your own experience with each cup of coffee that you're trying, right? So that when we're talking about it, and you will have heard Ben say these things, and you'll hear me talk about them as we do brewing methods, we'll be talking about these flavors that we're noticing. And I know we can't be with you face to face right now in the stores in the same way, or in our labs in the same way, but at least we can be spending this time together here, talking about what we've learned about coffee, the ways that we appreciate it, and to maybe make even something like our label make a little more sense. So that the next time you look at the Guatemala Esperanza, which is our new Guatemala, it's a Caturra variety, and we talk about brown sugar, apple, and raisin, it will make maybe a little more sense as to why we're talking about those things. So I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope to see you again. And please, if you share this video today after it's done, I will make sure to put your name into a drawing. We're giving away coffee for the folks who share these videos. We'll have a drawing every week. So thanks again, and I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I'm going to do a little bit of a hike and brew some coffee outside. Right? Take care.